Welcome back, everyone, for the second session of this online Enlightenment retreat. I hope you all had a chance to tune into the first session. If not, no big deal. You're still going to be able to utilize this session, and you can always go back to the other session at bentinhomassaro.tv/free retreat. So in the last session, we kind of introduced you to the topic of enlightenment, the possibility of it, and the fact that it's extremely helpful if you believe it is possible, especially if you believe it's possible for you. And I tried to encourage you to believe that it is possible for you, that in fact it is actually already the case. It's already in truth what you are. It's not something you create anew. It's not something you really, in a sense, get to or acquire in any way like that. Because that which is always true needs to be always true. And therefore, it stands apart from time and space and effort and cause and effect. However, we can either recognize this already enlightened nature of ourselves, or we cannot recognize it. It's really that simple. So our only option in life, from the vantage point of enlightenment, is to either recognize our enlightened nature or to not recognize our already present enlightened nature. I also talked about or recommended that you view the path to enlightenment as kind of a trajectory or a spectrum rather than a black or white type of thing. I won't repeat my reasons for that because that's in the first session, but I just wanted to repeat or summarize that. And today, there's a few topics I'd like to discuss, some of which may be postponed until the next session, depending on kind of on how this session flows and how much time is left by the end of it. But one of the main topics I wish to discuss with you is the art of meditation, or I would even say the art of true meditation. There are a lot of meditation techniques out there, and they're all fine for what they are. But I would say there are some that are definitely better than other meditation techniques or suggestions. Now, of course, it all depends on what it is you wish to realize. But given that the topic that we're focused on is the science of self-realization or enlightenment, and making this accessible to you in a directly experiential way so that you experience what it's like to be liberated from the false assumptions that you have of yourself. That you can recognize your eternalness, your changeless, pristine, blissful self, beyond the surface of your thoughts and emotions and belief systems. Given that this is our goal, that this is our intention for this sort of course or retreat, there's definitely a selection of meditation suggestions or methods, if you will, or models that are definitely more precise and that will be more efficient to get us to that goal, or if we see it as a spectrum, to get us to experience more and more of that goal on a day-to-day basis. So, there's mainly three methods that I want to share with you that are sort of distillations, very direct methods, so that all the time you do spend on meditation will help you get closer to a sort of vibrational alignment or an alignment in consciousness with that supreme self, the God state, that enlightened body or the enlightened mind, if you will, the natural state, the liberated state, the free state, that state of pure consciousness. One I already shared with you last week, without really mentioning that I was sharing it with you, which was the practice of relaxing all your thoughts and emotions, and especially relaxing your allegiance to the thoughts and the emotions, your descriptions about the thoughts and the emotions, your definitions of what's appearing. We discussed how there is consciousness, and then there is what appears. So every experience that consciousness is having, we call an appearance. A thought is an appearance. It appears. It appears and then it disappears. It appears and then it disappears. An emotion, as visceral and intense and close to yourself as it may feel, and as threatening at times as it may feel, an emotion is an appearance too. Energy in the body, sensation, touch, sense perceptions of any kind, really. Taste, hearing, sight. These are all appearances. And we could view these appearances as if they are arising within the subject, within that greater self, or within that space of consciousness. And on a day-to-day basis, we get so lost in object attention. And really, when you boil enlightenment down, the process of enlightenment, of deepening self-realization, it is, which we'll get into with the meditation techniques, you'll see this will come back. It's basically as simple as dissolving more and more of our object attention addiction, our addiction to object attention. We're like this kitty cat, when you get a new kitty cat as young, playful, and it just, whatever moves, it's focused on whatever moves. And we are actually like that, even if we're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. We're still kind of like this. Ooh, emotion. Ooh, thought. Ooh, sensation. Ooh, promise of pleasure. Ooh, promise of pain. We're constantly object focused, and we're constantly describing the contents of our consciousness, the contents of our perception. And because we're so focused on the contents of our perception, we forget the bigger thing that is subtler, but that is so obviously present and larger or bigger or grander or greater or prior to or more foundational than the objects that appear. So enlightenment can be distilled as, or summarized as, a change in attention from object focus to subject focus. We forget the subject as soon as we're focused on an object. And our focus on an object typically, again, goes hand in hand with a description of an object or the description of an appearance. And what we find is that when we relax our descriptions of what appears, our attention quite naturally begins to sink back, sort of step back onto itself, or rest back into its deeper state of consciousness, its source, if you will. When we're focused on objects, our attention goes outward. We develop descriptions, definitions, belief systems. We develop a subject-object relationship to the contents of our consciousness. And this subject-object relationship, on a day-to-day basis, as it gets reinforced, without no real awakening from this spell for the majority of our adult lives, and as we grow up, actually. So basically our entire lives, we are caught in this wheel of object-focused attention, a state of consciousness that is caught up in the sense of I'm a subject, although it doesn't even really have that sense consciously. It's lost even that sense in a typical case. But it's the consciousness that's lost its own status, its own awareness of itself. And it's now lost in object focus, which produces the feeling that we are the subject in a limited type of way. Like typically that is the body. We feel like we are the body looking at external objects external to our body. And once we're lost in this sort of wheel, and you could call that samsara, some people call that samsara, or the wheel of suffering, it requires us to pause that momentum. It requires us to create an interruption in that stream of thought, that stream of attention, in order to quite literally awaken, just like our dream at night needs to be interrupted in order for us to awaken back to the fact that we were laying in our beds this whole time. It's not very different from that. We need to interrupt ourselves, learn to, in a positive, loving way, interrupt our thought stream, our focus on objects, our focus on describing objects. And so the first meditation technique is one that's really simple, and it's applicable multiple times throughout the day. That's the particular use of this third, or we could say first, because I'm describing it first, this first meditation technique. And it's the meditation technique that it's kind of like you take with you wherever you go. It's like you put it in your pocket and you pull it out as often as you remember. Like your phone, and you could even try to remember it every time you look at your phone. So maybe put a what's it called? Image on the background of your phone, and every time you pull it out, it will remind you of this particular meditation, which is to relax all thoughts, all descriptions, for 2 to 5 seconds. Just that. But make sure it's genuine. Make sure that it's not just another thought about relaxing all thoughts for 2 to 5 seconds. Right? So initially you'll have the reminder, okay, I'm going to commit to relax all thoughts or all attention on objects for 2 to 5 seconds. But then actually do it. Actually sort of take a deep breath. You can do it now. Take a deep breath. And almost pretend like you're taking all your thoughts, all your object-focused worries, concerns, attention, stress. You're taking all of that as you breathe in. You're kind of catching all of it. And then you're throwing it out. You're just giving it back to the Creator. You're giving it back to life. You're giving it back to God. You're disowning your thoughts for 2 to 5 seconds. Completely radically. Just for a moment. And, again, important, in that hiatus, in that interruption, in that moment of pause, or you could say that moment of nothingness, brief nothingness. It's a brief introduction to nothingness, which is not the same as self-realization, and we may get into that in a little bit, or maybe in a later session. But you're relaxing your attention on the moving component of the mind. As a result, you're kind of left with a blankness or a nothingness, or the space between two thoughts, as it's sometimes referred to. Now, what's important is that that is not yet the meditation that's fruitful. It's not about being blank. It's not about necessarily maintaining a state of non-conceptual thinking, although it has its uses. But what's valuable is that in that hiatus, in that blankness, you recognize, and you can try this right now, you recognize that something is aware of that moment. In this case, without thinking too much, by giving away all your thoughts, you can notice, you can sort of wake up to the clarity that remains, the cognizance, the attention, the awareness that remains, that is still aware of my voice, even though you're not really thinking about my voice. And it's like your attention turns away from the objects inside the room, and it becomes aware of the room itself. It's a similar shift, but more profound, if you take this deep enough, because what you're actually doing, and this is really the bottom line of what true meditation is, as opposed to sort of all kinds of meditation techniques that are good for 1 or 2 little goals at a time. But when it comes to the real enlightenment-based true meditation methods, what you really want to do is you want for you, and what is you but consciousness, that which hears my voice right now, that which witnesses your body, that which has this feeling of I am, of I exist. And you want, for that consciousness, you want to create an opportunity, as many opportunities as you can, as many reflective moments for that consciousness, that awareness as you can, for it to recognize itself rather than to be lost in object focus. And it might sound a little bit technical, but I hope you agree with me that actually this is the whole summary of enlightenment, and it is quite simple. There's not that much to it. In essence, now we can describe uh, a whole lot of distinctions and sort of stages and all that, but that's really secondary to the message here, the essence of what enlightenment is and what true meditation is. The true meditation is nothing but the means to attain greater enlightenment. And so, if enlightenment is self-realization, it's recognition, it's realization of self as opposed to objects, or the subject as opposed to objects or appearances, then the true goal of meditation should be to, as directly as possible, create opportunity within your experience for this baseline consciousness, for this primordial state of you, which never changes, to be able to see itself, to notice itself, to catch itself, to hold on to itself, to recognize itself. And there is not really many more effective ways than the three ways that I'm about to share with you. And so you can sort of pick and choose. You can try them all. And one I've already shared, which is the one that's kind of the pocket version of the other two meditations. Meaning that the other two meditations, although you can also take them with you, and eventually they will just be with you all the time, but they're more designed for if you have some time to sit down and do sort of a more formal meditation session for 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes, whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you're able to free up, whatever you prioritize or desire to free up for this. Since you're in quarantine, I'm estimating for most of you it'll be between 8 to 12 hours a day after watching the session. So these two meditations are more designed as sort of a sit-down meditation. And this one that I just described is something you can do on the fly. You can pull it out of your pocket, so to speak, and take a deep breath. Gather all your thoughts together, if you will, and then give up all your allegiance, all your attachment, all your focus on whatever object you were thinking about and whatever you were busy describing and telling stories about. So you give all your stories away. And then you'll notice there is, for even just a couple seconds, there is a sort of blankness that you haven't spent a lot of time with yet before, if you're new to this. And in this blankness, or in this sort of non-conceptual state of the mind, there is a greater ability to use that state of the mind as a mirror for consciousness to recognize itself in. So it's really a two-step exercise. One is to relax all thoughts and descriptions and focus on objects, to give it all away. Surrender it all, back to life, to God, to source, whatever you want to call existence, all this. So you give it away, you disown it. You just radically decide, I'm going to cut ties with my stories, with my attachments, with my investments, with my thoughts, ideas, beliefs, etc. Just for 2 to 5 seconds. You can pick it back up, and trust me, you will. Most likely, you will pick it back up. So don't worry, nothing is lost. You're still going to be as attached as you were before. You're still going to be as attached to outcome as you were before. But at least you're going to soothe that a little bit. At least you're going to create an opportunity for awakening from that, so that the choice, the free will, is regained. Because right now, most of you, no offense, are caught in a cycle of continuous descriptions. And in that cycle of continuous descriptions, you may have the feeling like you have free will, like you're choosing, but there's not much left of your original state of freedom, your original state of true free awareness, true free choice, the free ability to truly recognize and discern between what is true, what's not true, what is prioritized, and what should not be prioritized, etc. So to regain that power of your freedom, of your awareness, of your consciousness, and with that also your actual free will, beyond thoughts, the freedom to know yourself and to choose how to manifest and express yourself, is regained only when we break the chain of endless thinking. Now, Again, relaxation is quite enough for most people, just to relax that attachment, to sort of enter more into a blank state of mind for just a few seconds is enough. That's the first step, the relaxation into sort of a blankness, into a relaxedness. And then the second step in those 2 to 5 seconds, and you'll get better and better at this. It's not that hard. It requires some practice, but it's not that hard. And once you get it, you can repeat it. And that's really where the compounding effects come into play. That's where the bliss begins to awaken within you. For some, that might take a little bit more practice than for others. But eventually, you will tap into sort of a sky-like bliss, a space-like joy, an expansive type of feeling of eternity, invincibility, ancientness, changelessness, brightness, vibrancy, Satchitananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. So, something to look forward to, I promise. So the first step is to relax all thoughts. The second step is to recognize the clarity, the consciousness that remains. And that's really where this method comes into play. It's the recognition of yourself, of the subject, of that spacious or space-like or sky-like awareness, which is already hearing my voice, which doesn't have a particular form of its own. That's why it's hard for the human conceptual mind that's so focused on objects all of its life to recognize it. It's like a fish recognizing water. It's so subtle, it's so all-pervasive, it's so always present. It's so part and parcel of everything that it sees and does and interacts with that it cannot recognize it, so to speak. It doesn't know water. Similarly, just like you don't really pay much attention to air unless there's a fire and there's smoke or there's some other kind of hazard or lack of oxygen. But for the most part, you're not aware of air. But think about it, it's here all the time. It surrounds all the objects that you're so focused on. Without it, you wouldn't be able to think about the things, about the objects that you're thinking about. You wouldn't be able to describe anything because you'd be dead. So it's part and parcel of who we are. It's so crucial, it's so foundational, it's so subtle, it's so all gravity. Gravity is here constantly, but how many of us are thinking about gravity for even 1% of the day, right? We take it for granted. The true self, it's the exact same thing. It's hiding in plain sight, and once you see it, once you begin to recognize it, you will laugh. You will begin to laugh when you really, really begin to recognize the... Yes, so just like the fish doesn't recognize water because it's so obvious, and a human doesn't recognize gravity because it's so part and parcel of everything that it's doing. It's so integrated, interwoven with the very fabric of its everyday waking experience that it goes unnoticed. Same with awareness. But if you relax all your descriptions, all your attention on objects or thoughts or future projections or concerns, etc., just radically become fully present, give it all away to God, or again, whatever you want to symbolize life to be. Disown it. Say no more. No more thoughts right now, just for a few seconds. I can pick it back up later. But for now, done. No more thoughts. A radical stopping of all descriptions. And in that brief moment, there is a natural, innate clarity that's recognized. And this is like the water waking up to the presence, the fish waking up to the presence of water. Or the human remembering and recognizing and appreciating the presence of gravity. It's very similar to that. It's a shift from objects to the space around the objects, or content to the container, or appearances to the consciousness to which they appear, or inside of which they appear. Appearances appear only inside of consciousness. You've never had an experience apart from consciousness, just like the fish has never had an experience apart from water. And we've never walked around this earth without gravity. It's very similar to that. You've never been there to experience something without having been there to experience something. And what is the means to experience something? Is it not consciousness? Is it not you? Is it not your being there, your being conscious right there to have a perceptual experience? Just like the dream at night is completely dependent on the mind that's dreaming or on the consciousness that's dreaming. No? Your dream, you seem to have a body, you seem to have ears and mouth and nose and eyes, and you seem to see people with those senses. But when you wake up, you realize you didn't really have a body in the dream state. It was all fabricated, it was all produced, it was all projections of your consciousness. But the whole world that you experienced during the dream state seemed very real, and it seemed to exist on its own terms. Out there, you were just a witness of it. But when you wake up, you realize that that whole world of perception occurred only inside of mind or inside of consciousness. Very, very similarly, I would almost say exactly the same, in the same way, you can begin to realize, you can begin to realize, if you're open to this, you can turn the whole universe inside out, and that's really what enlightenment ultimately is. Now again, you don't have to go to that level if you don't want to, but you can. I just want you to know that you can. If you take this deep enough, and you're always in control of how deep you take this. So don't worry, just dabble if you want to. Put your little toe in, then put your big toe in, put your foot in, put your calf muscle in, put your whole leg in, then take a swim if you want to, then go underwater. It's up to you, right? But your worldview will change the more you practice. This sense of there being an objective, super solid world that is an alien threat to you as the body, that whole feeling of being the body inside of a world that causes your fear of death and all these other attachments that we have, that bog us down, that keep our vibration low, that keep us static and heavy, that don't allow us to just soar and fly and be free of fear, and then therefore love and give and create freely and recognize the purity and the perfection of all things as they appear, and be able to take skillful action to help balance things in the relative world. All of that is not available to us because true intelligence is not available to us, because we continue to believe in this bubble of our object-focused, generated storyline. And that's where all your suffering exists. And you can liberate yourself from this. You can, if you want to. If you believe it's possible. I'm telling you it's possible. It's up to you to believe that or not. If you believe it's possible, now the practice becomes valuable to you. And through the practice, you will gain more and more direct experience. And over time, the universe is like it's turned inside out. Instead of you being inside the universe, it's like the whole universe lives inside of you, without any sense of sort of delusion or there being a story about that. It's just the nature of perception becoming so aware of itself that it's turned inside out, kind of like a lucid dream. When you wake up, in perception changes, and you're so much more awake, and you're so much more alive, and you're so much more happy, and you're so much more skillful, so much more creative, so much more intelligent, so much more conscious, so much more in control, truly in control of yourself and of your world. This is possible for you in the waking state as well. It's the recognition of the fact that I exist. You exist, that pure sense, I exist, which remains as sort of the witness to the blankness. That which knows the absence of concern or the absence of thoughts. By the way, it's also the same thing that knows the presence of thoughts. It's just that when you're thinking, you're too distracted typically to recognize the subject. You're too object focused. Now you can and you will develop this capacity to play with the objects, to be in a normal, interactive, conventional experience, to have a dialogue with somebody, to play a game, or do whatever you do your job, and to still recognize, have moments of, and more perpetual moments of, and more pervasive moments of this sort of beaming, blazing clarity that kind of shines from the background of your existence, and it kind of outshines all the elements in your experience with a sort of love and a light and a bliss and an isness and a clarity and a consciousness and an awakeness, a lucidity. So more and more that's the case. And then at that point, and even before that point, it doesn't really matter whether you're thinking or not thinking, because you're able to recognize consciousness regardless. You're able to recognize the true nature of things directly, the isness of things directly, without the need to sort of stop thinking. But as an introductory sort of chapter of your search for enlightenment, the first few months of your practice, it's very helpful to stop the thoughts as best you can, as much as you can. Just radically suck the air out of the mind. Become really present, kind of focused, although you could also kind of describe it as completely not focused. But that's still, it's a type of focus. Huh? It requires some motivation, some dedication. But you give away all focal points, but you stay aware, you stay present, and you recognize the consciousness that's recognizing this moment, that's feeling the feeling of I exist. And then you just abide there a little bit. You just kind of milk those seconds. Maybe you can get to 5, 6, 7 seconds of just kind of basking in and appreciating this recognition of this brightness, this vividness, this clarity, this sense of I exist. And now I know that I exist. I just remembered that I am. And without thoughts, I still exist. And there's this grandness to this. There's this vastness. There's this bedrock quality, this foundational, changeless, boom, pervading quality to it. And then you just become more and more familiar with that state. You forget more and more of the objects more frequently, and you remember the essence of the subject more and more frequently. That, my friends, is enlightenment. That is the spectrum of enlightenment. It's really that simple, and you can do it today. Sounds like an advertisement, but you can do it today. It is kind of an advertisement. Everything I say is an advertisement for you to know yourself, for you to come back into the creatorness, the true essence of what you are. You deserve it, and you can, and it is what you are. So why not try to do this together? All right, that's enough repetition of meditation method number 1. Now, this kind of leads into one of the other ones. So if we kind of continue where I just left off, so we've relaxed all thoughts and emotions. And let's say you're at home and you're sitting down, you're not needing to be too interactional with the physical world for, say, 10, 20 minutes. So it's kind of a contemplative, meditative moment, maybe in the morning, maybe in the evening, doesn't really matter, whenever you have some time. And you just sit down, you're relaxed, you're comfortable somewhere where your body is just comfortable. Nothing special. You don't have to be in a particular position. Just make sure you're comfy and you can kind of forget about your body for a few minutes, or not be reminded of your body for a few minutes. And then you relax your thoughts. You begin to sort of commit yourself to the true self practice, the practice of coming back home to your true self. The practice of consciousness becoming aware of its own existence. Again, that's true meditation. It's consciousness becoming more aware of its own existence. And whatever sort of angle, entrance point, symbol, or method you want to use for that is a method of true meditation when we consider that if our intention indeed is enlightenment, right? Otherwise, any meditation technique is great, but it's only great at what it's designed to do. So it's not always great for self-realization. But these 3 are great for self-realization. So again, you relax all thoughts, you relax your body. And it's kind of like as if you're going to sleep. Just almost imagine as if you're falling asleep, but you maintain an awareness. You maintain consciousness. So it's like you're aware of allowing your body and your mind to kind of imagine them falling asleep. Don't actually fall asleep, but which can happen, and that's fine. But try not to fall asleep. It's just the imagining of falling asleep. It's just one part of the method. You don't even have to do this. It's not the method itself yet. Just sort of introductory as a way to help you relax and come to sort of a quieter place where the state of your consciousness becomes more reflective of itself, becomes more able to see itself in the mirror of your experience. Because you're less lost in the content, you're less externalizing yourself, you're less projecting outward, you're more at peace with yourself, you're more quiet, and in that stillness, in that presence, you're able to recognize much more directly and clearly and pristinely and joyfully the very fact that you are, the very fact that you exist, just that. So it's exactly what this meditation technique is. It's a deepening or continuation of the 2 to 5 seconds. 2 to 5 seconds, you take on the road with you. But when you sit down, you can also do the 2 to 5 seconds and just repeat it. But if you're able to, and you are ultimately, just deepen that. You continue to sort of abide in that feeling of I am, that feeling of existence, knowing that it exists, of I consciousness, know that I consciousness or beingness am. And try to just hone in on that subtle frequency, if you will. It's like tuning your radio to a particular frequency in order to hear that specific song. And again, it's like a fish recognizing water. Where does it look? What does water look like? It goes to other fish teachers and fish gurus. And the fish gurus try to tell the little guppy what water is. But the fish keeps looking for water to be some kind of an object. But it can't find it because water is everywhere, and it's part and parcel of all the things that it's ever experienced. And this is what we mean when we say subtle. The nature of what you really are is subtler than where you're typically focused, or the way in which you're typically focused, or the objects on which you're typically focused, which are grosser. They're more gross. They're more rough. They're more dense. They have a more tangible shape and form and size and limitation. So it's easier to recognize them, to focus on them, and it's easier to be distracted by them. That's why we give up all our descriptions and thoughts for a few seconds to kind of create an opening, a hiatus, an interruption in those clouds that cover the sun. The sun's already there. From the sun's perspective, the clouds don't matter whatsoever. Cloudy day, sunny day, it has no notion of that whatsoever. The true self is just like that. The true self has no notion of a turbulent day or a stressful day versus a peaceful and quiet day. It doesn't care. It couldn't care any less. The true self, not that it's not compassionate by nature, but just it doesn't make a difference. Just like a cloudy day from the perspective of a human being wanting to look up at the sun makes a difference. But if you were to be the sun, you have no notion of it being cloudy on Earth or not cloudy on Earth. And even if it is, even if you do have a notion of that, what difference does it make? You radiate just as brightly, just as steadily as you ever did. The true consciousness, which is ever hearing my voice without you doing anything about it, does not depend on your recognition of it. But that's your freedom. That's your choice to make. Do I want to recognize my true self? Do I want to recognize the emness, the beingness, the isness, the consciousness of what is always me? Or do I want to forget that and sort of fall into object focus, description-based, story-based personality living? And you can have, to some degree, you can have both. You can shift back and forth, but you'll find that one is much more blissful and truthful and clear and reliable than the other. Enlightenment. So, we want to create that little break in the chain of thoughts to allow for this reflective space to open up, self-reflective, where the feeling I am, not so much the thought I am, but because before the words I am cross your mind, you already at some level know, you already know that you are. You want to get in touch with that subtle, foundational knowingness of I exist. That deep, instinctive, intuitive knowledge or feeling of I am. And the more you're able to identify or hone in on that subtle frequency of the feeling state, before the thoughts, just the feeling state, the true pure knowledge state, the knowing that I am, knowing the knower basically, being aware of awareness. Those are all synonyms for the same state. Being the fact that you are, knowing the fact that you know, being conscious of the fact that you're conscious, being aware of the fact that you are aware, knowing that you're knowing, recognizing that you're recognizing. So I'm just choosing the words for right now. I'm choosing the words I exist or I am. Go to the feeling, the direct pure knowledge, which you already have. It's already active on some level of your consciousness, just like gravity is already active. You just have to kind of search for it in an unorthodox way, in an unusual way, a way in which you're not used to focusing your attention. Because it's a concentration, but it's a defocusing on any of the objects that you're familiar with. And in that defocusing, in that relaxation of your focus, without losing concentration or presence or consciousness, you quite naturally allow for more of your mind's bandwidth to become reflective of that pure consciousness, that pure sense of I exist. I hope this makes sense. So that is the practice, is to identify the feeling of I am, and to, as much as possible, maintain pristine awareness. Learn to sort of quote unquote concentrate or defocus, yet be aware of that base feeling of I know that I exist. And you just kind of ignore everything else. For the period that you've set aside for meditation, you kind of ignore every other thought. You just don't pay it any significance. Don't give it any significance. And this is one of the topics I kind of want to talk about. Maybe today, maybe next session. But it's how to not give things significance and why that's a good thing. And how that's actually balanced and holistic. And this will greatly help you in your relaxation into the recognition of your true self. Because meaning is what distracts us from this natural state. More on that later. So, first technique, relax for 2 to 5 seconds and recognize the consciousness, the beingness, the isness, the clarity that remains. Second meditation tool is kind of similar. You just relax until you recognize that I amness, but you're doing it for a longer period of time, and you kind of try to maintain awareness of that subtle knowledge of I am, and you kind of try to go deeper with it. And going deeper, or sort of penetrating through the layers of your sense of self, I will explain using the diagram that I drew. But the essence of it is that you identify whatever sense of I exist you can find, the clearest sense of I exist, the innermost feeling of I am. And that pure knowledge, you will very quickly begin to recognize that this knowledge exists before the mind comes into play. It exists in a more foundational place prior to thoughts and descriptions and emotions. Meaning that whether or not you have thoughts and emotions and descriptions come up or appear, that knowledge is always at the root of your experience. In fact, without being conscious first, you wouldn't have any experience of the contents of consciousness. You wouldn't have an ability to describe the contents of your consciousness. You wouldn't be able to complain. You see, complaining is a total forgetfulness of the fact that you can even complain. You can be grateful for your complaining moments by realizing that without existing, you couldn't even complain. It's such a privilege to complain. So you turn complaint into gratitude very easily. Anyway, so we rest, we abide in the I am. We just stay as much as we can. We purify, we stay as purely as we can with that instinctual recognition of I exist. Before the words, it's already there. The I am is already there. Your consciousness is already hearing my voice. And you just kind of repeat or maintain that recognition. And it becomes more and more experiential. And when it becomes more and more a feeling state, a visceral feeling state, then maintaining it or holding on to it becomes easier, because it's just like focusing on something that has a tangible form, a gross physical object, let's say an apple or a chair or a table or a pen. It's easy to maintain your attention on it because it has a shape, it has a size, it has a feeling to it. So it gives you properties to focus on. Now, initially, the subject doesn't appear to you to have any properties or qualities. So you're kind of like the fish in water trying to find water. But once the fish is able to recognize the water, it begins to taste water. It begins to pay attention to water, and it begins to develop a unique feel for how the water is touching its scales, which it didn't have before. But because it's now awakening, it's becoming aware, and in this case, you are becoming aware of the all-pervading nature of consciousness, and that you cannot have any perception or experience or complaint or emotion or story without consciousness. It becomes obvious. And the feeling of consciousness, which is the feeling of I exist, or I am, just that, no additions, just purely formless I am feeling. Now this formless feeling of I am becomes obvious enough to you, clear enough to you, distinguishable enough to you, to where it becomes easier to, for lack of a better word, hold your attention onto it, hold on to it, maintain it, abide in it, rest with it, maintain awareness of that feeling, because it's becoming more obvious. So, that was the second technique. The third meditation technique is kind of a different spin on the same thing, but it's quite different, and its effects can be different, and some people prefer this method over the other method, and vice versa. I found them both to be very, very beautiful and valuable in my journey. So this is the approach of, instead of focusing on what you are, you're becoming more aware of what you're not. And in Vedanta philosophy, they call this neti-neti, N-E-T-I, which kind of means not this, or not that, not that. So it's leading to the same realization as the other meditation technique that I shared. It's leading you more directly to what you really are, to realization of yourself. Not the objects, not even the false sense of the subject, but the real awareness, ultimately. The real consciousness, the real pure beingness, the real God state. But it's doing so in a negative way rather than a positive way. So instead of focusing on the true self, it's focusing on what you're not and realizing, discerning what you're not. So it's the way of negation. It's the way of saying, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, to kind of arrive ultimately at what remains. And what remains must be what I am. And then that can recognize itself. It can realize itself when it has sort of taken off all of its coats, shed all of its layers. And you could argue that with every layer you shed, you get a little bit more in touch with this true self. The dimmer or lamp cover, if you will, around the light bulb becomes thinner and thinner, or there's less and less lamp covers, there's less and less layers, there's less and less veils covering the true self. So your vibration, if you will, your frequency, your state of consciousness begins to mimic, begins to be transparent to, begins to become one with the true self, once again, more and more, through this practice of giving away what you are not. So, it's a very simple method. A thought comes up, and if you're conscious of the thought, or if you're deliberately practicing meditation, then I assume you're conscious of the thought. And then you observe the thought like you would observe any physical object, and you find out if it contains you. If you, your sense of I, is that object, or is that thought. You can start with physical objects too. And you can then move on to emotions and feelings and sensations, and you can move on to thoughts and beliefs. And everything you observe, you realize it's a perception, it's an appearance inside of you, inside of your consciousness. And as the appearance appears, as the thought appears, you negate it as not being you. Not just conceptually, but by actually looking at it and seeing that you could never possibly be this hand, right? This hand is appearing. In my consciousness, I'm aware of this, what we call this hand. But what portion of this hand is me? Is all of it me? Is this finger me? Is the movement aspect of it me? Is the fleshy part of it me? Are the bones me? So you just investigate, especially the objects you've identified with or that distract you, that you give a lot of meaning in your life, that cause a lot of suffering and struggle and stress and strive and contractions. You especially take those objects because those are the objects you're bound by your own free will, by your own delusion, by your own ignorance of your true self. You have lodged your true self onto these object perceptions or descriptions, and you believe yourself to be identified with them, to be tied to them, that their fate equals your fate, and that's why you are so concerned. That's why you lose all this ability to recognize yourself and to operate from a state of clarity and unity with the Creator. That's why you become less intelligent, more static, more human, more on a treadmill, more automatic pilot. You lose more and more of your freedom, your free will, your creativity, your childlike spark of the Creator. You lose it more and more and more because you believe more and more and more that you are the thoughts and you are the objects you're describing. This is no way to live. It's absolute bondage. It's absolute suffering. It's terror, self-imposed terror. You don't have to live that way. And you don't have to fear not living that way, because not living that way is great. And you want it. Trust me, you want to not live that way. That's what you've always wanted. That's what you've always been searching for. In this mess of the objects and your descriptions and your thoughts and emotions, what you've secretly been looking for is exactly what I'm trying to tell you here. But you fear it. What fears it, though? Is that you? Good point. Is the fear of living this way that I'm describing, that I'm advertising, that I'm promoting on behalf of yourself, to remind you to wake up to your true self, your true potential, your true capacity, your true freedom? And in the face of that, a lot of fear comes up for that. Oh, but what about this? What about that? Because we've become so attached, so blinded, so deluded, so painfully fallen asleep in our thoughts, that we really fear the most natural, eternal, everlasting, invincible state known to anything in creation. That we fear that which is already our home, and it's inevitably our place to which we return. And it's here, and it's conscious, and it's alive. It's not death, it's alive. But we fear it because we have so many wrong ideas about what's true and who we are. So this exercise is particularly helpful in shedding the layers of the onion, shedding the associations, and making your feeling of I am purer and purer and purer, meaning less and less and less clothing, less and less covers, less and less associations, to the point where that I am begins to reveal its purity, its freedom, its vastness, its universality. And that's where the unity with God comes in. That's where the individual feeling of I am can merge into the oceanic, vast, infinite sense or knowledge, the essential universal knowledge of I am, the great I am, the universal beingness, the universal consciousness, the God state, Satchidananda, awareness, love, light, awareness, consciousness, existence, bliss. Unity, oneness, without losing anything. I'm still talking to you. All you gain is what's true, and you'll just lose your allegiance to the false. But you don't lose the false, it's still here. You can still interact with the false. You just don't think it's you, and therefore you're free of it, and therefore you can love it, because you can't love anything as long as you don't believe you're free of it. That's why relationships are an absolute hoax in most cases. Because we're not free of them, right? If I'm not free of you, how can I love you? You know, when you quit your job, suddenly you love your job. The last week of your job is amazing. Let's say you've been at this job and you've hated it for the last 2 years, and you resign, you give your 2 weeks notice or whatever. Those 2 weeks are the best time at your job because you're free. You're free of the job. You know that the consequences of whatever you do are no longer a part of you. They're no longer going to affect you. They have nothing to do with you. You know you're about to leave, and suddenly you're so present and you have these awesome interactions with your colleagues who you were sitting next to for 3 years, but you never noticed, just like gravity, just like your true self. But suddenly there's this spark, there's this aliveness, this freedom. It's the same with everything we relate to. Every object that you feel attached to or identify with, you cannot fully love. You can pretend you love it. You can believe you love it, but you don't. You care for it because of what it means to you, and you don't want to lose it. So, true love is absolutely free. This goes for all of our relationships to all aspects of creation, including other people, but also objects and activities and hobbies and passions and jobs and careers and ideas and visions and our own bodies and etc. Animals, outcomes in the world. I got a little off track there, but maybe someone needed to hear this. So you won't lose anything that's real. You will only regain that which is real, and it's so worth it, my friends. It's so worth it. So why fear your true self? It's always with you. Why fear it? So don't fear it. Begin giving away everything that's not you. Just intellectually, just by discerning. This is the power of the mankind's ability to have intellectual discernment. We can, through true discernment, combining intuition and intellect in a way, we discern, we look, we observe at the objects that we are aware of until we have clearly seen and realized that we are not contained in any portion of the object. As soon as you realize that, you're free of it. It's a wonderful feeling. It's like the object is still there. You can still treat it the same way you did before, but you're free of it. You're liberated from it. You're no longer attached to outcome. And now your interaction with it becomes present and pure and, like I said, loving and truly caring. Not falsely caring, not selfishly caring. Truly, generously, freely caring and precise. So take your thoughts, take your fears about this practice, for example, and look at, try to discover if you are contained by any of those fears, or if they're just passing by like rain on a windshield, just like whoop, whoop, wiped away, whoop, whoop, wiped away, whoop, whoop, wiped away, or even the windshield wipers, which are still going back and forth, but they also don't distract you. They don't have to. They don't define you, right? They feel closer than the raindrops. Raindrops are gone in a second. The windshield wipers are with you for longer. Analogy could be the body or the mind or your partner or your house or your dog. They're there for a long time, but still, it's just something that's passing through your consciousness. It's not your true self. Doesn't mean you don't care. Doesn't mean you don't love. Doesn't mean you don't take care of. It just means it's not defining of your essence. Your freedom is not locked into it. That's only a choice. That's a thought, a conceptual. So look at your fear, any fear really, but especially your fear of this practice, and see if you're really afraid. Is it you that is afraid? Or is it the fear that is afraid? And does the fear does any portion of the fear contain your existence? Is your innermost feeling of I am in any way affected by this appearance of the fear? Just look at it, investigate. And then you'll come to the conclusion eventually, if you do this clearly enough, that I am not this. And not just intellectually. This is a mistake people make with the neti-neti practice. They just kind of repeat, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this, I'm not this. Yes, for some people that can work, but for a lot of people it creates sort of an intellectual kind of a trap, and it can work to some degree, but then it kind of stops being functional. So you want to deepen that. You want to really take your conscious awareness, observe a thought or an emotion until you've exhausted every portion of it and you know for sure it's not you. Then you're free of it forever. If it's not forever, you haven't looked thoroughly enough. You still have a belief that you're attached to it. You can apply this to your body. Are you contained by any of your limbs, any of your blood vessels, any of your organs? Does any of them, does your brain contain you, your sense of existence? And that's something magical happens when you get to that stage of examining the body. You realize consciousness, you are not the body. The body is an appearance inside of consciousness, just as the world is an appearance inside of consciousness. But this may be for a little later stage. I might be getting ahead of yourselves at this stage, but at least you know sort of the possibilities of how far you can take this, and it's beneficial. It's absolutely beautiful, and it gets you closer to the truth. It makes you less delusional, not more delusional. But take it at your own pace so that you can handle the sort of shifts in consciousness and identity that occur. So again, first exercise, take it with you on the road, relax, 2 to 5 seconds, all thoughts and descriptions and object focus, and in the blankness you recognize consciousness, you recognize clarity, you recognize cognizance, you recognize the fact that you exist without the thoughts. Wonderful, beautiful, boom, repeat that many times a day. Simple, easy, quick, but do it thoroughly, do it with will, do it with intent. Second, relax body and mind for a longer period of time, as in a meditative experience. And identify the feeling of I exist, of I am. And then that subtle feeling, you make it more obvious. You make that, you discover it with a curiosity. You try to sort of taste it, feel it, see it, be it. This sense of I exist, make it clearer and clearer until that subtle frequency becomes more stable, until it becomes like a mountain, until it becomes so obvious that it's almost all-consuming, that it's so self-evident that you cannot help but have a conversation with someone without recognizing your pure existence, outshining that whole experience while you're interacting with your body and their body. And that's where the intelligence comes in. That's where God consciousness begins to take over your actions, your behavior, and you become what I call a mirror being, which mirrors whatever comes into its field in an intelligent, intuitive, reflective manner. Whatever it does and says now is for the entity that comes into your view. But again, that's later, quite a bit later of a stage. But again, sometimes I want to kind of advertise and hint the potential of this. So it becomes stable. That's my main point here at this stage, is that which previously eluded you, like water eluded the fish, now becomes so obvious to you that you can see it all the time. You can just hold on to it. It no longer takes effort. It's there. You can recognize it at will. Sometimes even without will, it just is obvious to you. Wonderful, because, whoa, it relaxes every muscle in your being, basically. It gives you such a reliability and a clarity and a freedom in everyday experiences. Reliability. And again, in this time of sort of chaos, as the mind describes it, it's not really there when we don't describe it, but the chaos appears as we describe the world and we get lost in the thoughts and the philosophies about what's going on. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have this enlightened stability at the foundation of our consciousness, at the foundation of our sense of daily living? This foundation at the basis, at the root of our everyday living experience, that we sort of jump off from and do our things from, and allow that intelligence, that field of consciousness to sort of inform through its freedom, through its generosity, allow us to inform our actions, allow it to inform the body's actions and thoughts. And that's when you start to get into a sort of a more permanent flow state. When you become, quote unquote, good at this, when you be able to recognize this, it's like flow state takes over. Instead of having to climb a mountain without ropes, which I tried, or dive deep down without oxygen, which I tried, it's here. And I didn't do that to find out the flow state. I just thought that would be awesome activities. But people seek it in those types of activities. They seek that flow state. The flow state is nothing but allowing that truer consciousness to shine forth and inform the body and the mind. It's like you relax. You sort of get out of your own way, and this intelligence takes over, and you're much more capable, skillful, creative. Your timing is excellent. You're better at everything than you ever thought you would be. It's just like that. And you can make this permanent. Another benefit, another advertisement of by yourself, for yourself, to wake up to what you really are and to practice, and to believe in what I'm saying here. Practice it. Find out for yourself. Don't just believe it. Believe it enough to where you're curious enough to begin to practice it so you can find out for yourself. Don't take my word for it, but at least believe it's possible and then begin to practice. right? So the second practice is holding on to the I am until it's more and more obvious. The sense of consciousness, sky-like spacious, formless awareness, just a feeling of beingness or I amness. Those are all different slants on essentially the same presence, the same consciousness, the same beingness, the same foundation, the same life itself, basically, that which is alive, that which exists. And then the third, as we just discussed, is a giving away of everything that you perceive. Because if I see it, how can I be it? Hmm? So you investigate appearances, especially the ones that you're mostly identified with, like the body, the mind, your fears, your desires, other people, your relationship to God, maybe, if you're religious. And you investigate these appearances, these thoughts, emotions, belief systems, and feelings until you realize through clarity, through direct observation, you see that it's not you. It's just simple. It's empty. It's naked. It just drops like a water droplet from a leaf into a quiet little pond with no other sounds around. And suddenly you just know, I am not my body. And it's clear as day and it's undeniable. Or you know, I am not my emotions. And you're free from emotions, even as they continue to rage or move through you from time to time. At the same time, you'll be free of whatever appears if you've investigated whether or not it contains yourself. When you know clearly that you are not what appears, the freedom and the bliss that can be accessed and the intelligence is hard to describe. Enlightenment is possible, it's here, it's for you. Click here, pause for 2 to 5 seconds. Recognize what's already watching. Recognize the effortless, inevitable state of primordial wisdom shining through your eyes right now. Hearing my voice. It's the state that's talking to itself through my body, through your body, and it's awakening itself. It's nothing to do with this body. It has nothing to do with your body. This is pure consciousness talking to itself through 2 different telephones. Welcome to our unity self. Welcome to your freedom. Welcome to your empowerment. Welcome to the true life. Welcome to heaven. True heaven. All right. Let me check on timing for a second. Okay, so I will save the talk about meaning and significance for the next time. Just because these explaining these meditation techniques, I wanted to be thorough. I want you to be able to rewatch this once or twice more and then be totally set for life, like really know the art of meditation, really have everything you need to practice sort of this direct path to your enlightenment, to your liberation, to your freedom, my friends. Cheers, toast. I wanted you to be thorough with this, to have a thorough understanding of this, and so it took a little bit longer. I'm just considering whether to discuss the diagram right now or next session. Yep, I'll save it for next session because I really want you to integrate this. So I will go through some of the questions that have been asked and pick a few that stand out to me, and I'll answer those, and then we'll meet back again on Saturday. And of course, I hope you try out the practices. Tim Bedun on Facebook asked, Ben explains beautifully, but why do I need so many words / objects to point to pure awareness before I get it? Beautiful question. This is the magical, mysterious power and illusion of words and concepts. The thing is, it's like you've been using a rope to tie yourself in all these knots, and now you've got this bundle of knots. It seems completely it's messy. It seems completely chaotic and almost random. You're going to use that same rope to reverse that process. So all these words, all these concepts, all these objects have gotten you into this funk, into this bundle of concepts, into this bundle of confusion, unclarity, of forgetfulness of self. And now, in order to remember yourself, a lot of people will require to sort of begin to untie at least some of these word streams, at least some of these concepts and objects that have gotten so entangled. So, by me beginning to talk and lay things out in a sort of clear step by step way, and the more I talk about this topic, the more sense it will begin to make. Because as we go, as we are here together in this space, describing the nature of what you are and the nature of how you've gotten collapsed into what you're not, you begin to see that some of these words will land for some people consciously, some unconsciously. And as some of these words begin to sort of sink in, they have the effect of sort of reversing the process of entanglement. And it's we're using the power of words to counter the power of words that you've used in a diluted way. And now we're enlightening you using the same power of words. Or as the Indians say, using a thorn to remove another thorn, and then you throw both thorns away. So yes, we're using words to disentangle the words that have been embedded in your consciousness as reality, as your perception of truth, which is not the truth of who you are. And we're using the words to disentangle the words to leave you in this beautiful, pristine, empty, free, liberated space of your natural self. And it just takes some time. It takes more words for most people because we have so many word knots, and so we're disentangling them. Bennett Verbeck on YouTube asked, can you clarify how pure infinite love can appear in forms and vibrations that are seemingly fundamentally in opposition to its very nature, being love? In other words, how can the infinite appear finite? Well, why wouldn't it be able to? Really? Of course the infinite can appear finite. If it couldn't appear finite, then would the infinite not be limited to only appearing as infinite? And therefore, would it still be infinite, or would it be finite? So the experience of finiteness or hatred, if we use love as one of the primordial qualities of the infinite, not the human love, not the conditional love, not the romantic love, not the conceptual love, not the Disney movie love, actual love, which maybe we'll get into in one of the other sessions. Actual love. Like I love you. Like you love you. The nature of that love, of that freedom, of that infiniteness is freedom. Its very first distortion, its first manifestation is freedom of will or consciousness. It's awareness. This awareness has the complete freedom to shape the illusion of love and light in whatever ways it wants to, in order to produce the dimensions, the experiences, the bodies, the vehicles, the trajectories, the evolution of consciousness. As a testament, as an ode, as a poem to the one infinite source, to experience itself, to express itself, and to then be able to see its own faceless infinite nature in contrast to, or in the mirror of creation. In the mirror of diversity, it can realize its unity. In the mirror of hatred and chaos and confusion, it can realize its perfection and its love. In the mirror of finiteness, in finding an end to beingness or creation or existence, the infinite realizes itself in contrast to that finiteness as being indeed infinite. So by its very nature, infinity can appear as literally anything, because it is infinite. I want to let go. This is by Andreas Weiher, Weiher, Andreas Weiher on Facebook. I want to let go of the fear to be at one with the Creator. I realize that this fear exists, yet I can't grab, sense, see, feel this fear. How can I let go of it? Honestly, it's a process of elimination. It's a process of familiarization. As we begin to familiarize ourselves, our attention, our conscious attention, with that deeper consciousness, with that deeper sense of I am, we familiarize ourselves with the truth and we eliminate our attachments to the untrue. This happens for most people gradually. And it's probably a good thing that it does happen gradually for most people, because most people wouldn't be able to handle the shift in perception between the beginning stages and the final stages of this trajectory of enlightenment. It would simply be too psychedelic, too turned inside out, too opposite, too transcendent for the human mind that's based for so long in object, description, story focused bubble of this very, very, very limited identity. It would be dismantled. If it would be dismantled too quickly, there might be repercussions, there might be reactions by the mind to that, because it can't hold on to it, it can't grab it. So you're probably feeling the instinctual fear that a lot of people have to freedom. But it's because of your attachment to form and object-based focus. And that's where the meditations come in, my friend. If you practice those meditations, then completely at your own pace, you can begin to dismantle your delusions and liberate more and more of those tight knots and unwind them back into the flow, fluidity, the flow state, the intelligence, the innate primordial wisdom of your true self, the liberation that's available for you right here, right now, always and already. It's up to you how much you want to let go into that, how much you want to trust that. And direct experience generated by true meditation methods applied by you on a day-to-day basis will lead you to all the doorways that you need access to then decide for yourself how far down the rabbit hole you wish to go, which is really another way of saying how much of the truth do you wish to realize and embody. Up to you, totally up to you. So take it gradually, because you will anyway. And that fear will be dismissed naturally through your direct experience as you begin to touch upon and rely upon this eternal field of awareness, love, light, bliss, unity, consciousness, which doesn't lack identity. It has identity. It has aliveness. It exists. You are there. You exist. And so you begin to recognize yourself at that level instead of as object-based, fear-based, birth and death-based person. In other words, don't worry too much about the fear. Just do the practice at your own pace, and you will pass through these barriers and these thresholds, and you will reveal those fears to be not fearful at all. If one is not able to maintain the sense I am in meditation, because thoughts always take over, what might help? Some shamanic music, maybe? What do you recommend? There are actually a few sort of 2 to 3 hour segments on YouTube that I enjoy listening to, not so much for the purpose that you're using it for, probably, but when I work, when I write, I enjoy inundating my ears in that type of music. So we can maybe share some of these on the Bentinho Massaro Teaching and Community Group on Facebook. I'll make a note of that. My team knows now. So we'll make a note of that, and we'll share some of these. Um, so that can be helpful, yes, to help your body and mind relax and sort of retrieve an instinctual feeling of ancientness, which can bring about a more prominent or obvious sense of I exist or I am. But the primary suggestion I would have for this question of what to do when you have difficulty maintaining the feeling of I am because thoughts continuously take over. Well, first of all, anything you truly want, you have. So if you truly want the I am, you'll find a way to hold on to it for dear life. So I just want to make that disclaimer. So it is ultimately up to what you desire. Investigate your desires, see if they're in alignment with you or not. Maybe you desire things that you really don't desire. Let them go so more of your desire frees up to realize this already liberated space of infinite intelligence that's available with you right here, right now. Prioritize your desires. Let go of those that are not relevant, that are not important to you. You just think they are. So, but if you're in this sort of battle in your meditation, right, and then maybe just forget about it most of the time. Sometimes you can push through. If the will is strong enough, you can just force yourself to shut everything off and focus only on the I am. It's possible, but usually this already requires some prior work with meditation, some building of concentration and such. So if you can't do that, if you can't do it at will, and you sort of have to catch the wave when it's there and recognize the I amness when it comes to you naturally, by all means, then ride that wave for as long as you can by continuing to relax and recognize that it's always already the case. And this brings me to my main point for your question, my main tip, which is if you find yourself conscious enough to notice that you're getting distracted from the I am by thought streams, you have all the tools you need right there to recognize the I am. You see, you are conscious of getting distracted. That which is conscious of your distraction is not distracted. That which is aware of you getting lost in the thought stream is not lost in the thought stream. So right there, you can turn your confusion and your distraction into clarity and recognition effortlessly. And then you recognize the I am. You must be there before you can recognize that you're distracted. You must be there before you can see and witness and know all those thoughts. So then know the knower of the thoughts. Know that you are knowing the thoughts. Take a moment, take 2 seconds again to recognize that you are knowing the thoughts. And that again connects you to a more conscious sense of that which is already ever presently, unconsciously, superconsciously here. So turn your confusions into clarity, turn your distractions into recognition by always remembering that every experience, even distraction and confusion and illusion, confirm the existence of you as a consciousness, knowing the confusion, knowing the disturbance, knowing the distraction. Without your power to be and know and exist, you wouldn't be distracted. You wouldn't believe you are distracted. So you can always recognize that there is some root element of consciousness, of existence present, even when the appearance is not peace and calm, but chaos and disruption. The I am is always there. It can always be recognized or at least acknowledged. Maybe not purely maintained in a very deep experiential way, but it can be acknowledged at least, and that's your doorway to that deeper experiential state. It's the acknowledgement that the I am is also now here, aware of the confusion and the distraction. On YouTube, Sifu Kim Squires asked, is it possible to achieve self-realization by affirming that everything is you? I am that. I am that. I am that. I am that. I'm that. I'm that. I'm that. I'm that. Permeate everything. Or is it more effective to use the negation method you spoke of? Thank you. Great question. Very perceptive. And actually, I used to teach this method quite a bit, and I've used it quite a bit, the one you're suggesting. And I think it's very effective. So this could be considered a fourth technique that you can try. And sometimes this one is even easier to take on the road with you because you're encountering things and you're used to affirming objects already. Your mind's already used to cause and effect, to linearity, to being focused on objects and describing objects that have tangible form and shape and size, and is already used to forgetting the subject. So given that you're already so object-focused trained, now use this object focus to remember the I amness by calling the object the same name instinctively, not just verbally, although that helps too, but call it sort of with your whole beingness, with the whole essence, vibrationally, with your state of being. Refer to every object that you're aware of, or experience, or thought, or feeling, or landscape, or house, or it doesn't matter what it is, emotion, spiritual experience, thought, forgetfulness, chaos, peace, doesn't matter. Everything that you're aware of is an appearance, again, remember. And the appearances are manifestations, are projections of consciousness. Because without consciousness, you would not have the experience. Just like at night, you don't have a dream world without the dreamer's consciousness. The dream world consists of the consciousness. And in a later session, we probably go more into this unity principle or this inseparability. Part of the reason I didn't want to include these types of exercises yet. But this is innocent enough and or basic enough. Everyone can practice that and get the effects of it. So I'm happy you asked the question. Every object that appears, with your whole beingness, refer to it as God, or yourself, or the great I am, or pure consciousness, or the universal supreme essence of all things, or Buddha nature, or the already enlightened state, or whatever name you have for that source, God, creator, the infinite. And if you begin to relate to objects, every appearance, in that way, that's a very sure way to anchor yourself in a very profound sense of universal existence or beingness. In fact, it can help you skip a few steps, which I'll show in the diagram in the next session. But it can help you go straight from the object focus, which is the red square on the right, skip a couple of steps to go straight to sort of the God consciousness, or at least begin to contact that God consciousness, the universal nature that's not localized anywhere. So just so you remember for next session, you can go, or is it on screen? Yeah, put it on screen. Okay, 1 second, you'll see it. So again, I'll explain this diagram in much greater depth in the next session on Saturday. But what you're saying, seeing an object and calling it by God's name, whatever God's name is for you, and doing it with all your heart, as much as you can, like really giving your passion to it, like somehow, mysteriously, intuitively, I'm going to have faith in the fact that this table, somehow, it's actually that pure awareness, it's that pure, supreme, subtle, it's made of water. Somehow this is made of water, from the fish analogy. Somehow this is made of gravity, from the gravity analogy. Somehow this is made of my true self. This is like a dream at night is made of yourself. So too, somehow this chair, this table, this emotion, this thought, this feeling, this distraction, this relationship, this agony, this suffering, this pain, this joy, this excitement, whatever it is that appears that you can recognize, you name it, you give it God's name, you give it the name of the true self, whatever that symbol or word is for you. And then in that diagram, you can quite effectively, quite directly, shift all the way from the red box, which represents the physical body and the physical world and physical matter, and skip the level of sort of the mind, which is represented here by the orange wave, or the subtle body. And you can even skip sort of the individual state of the witness, or the individual feeling of I am over here as the witness of my world and my thoughts, and go straight to the non-local, the local, location transcendent I amness, which is really the essence of what you are in all states of mind, throughout all states of experience. And it's the essence of all of the appearances. That's what I call the God state, and that's the sort of suggestive aspect of a whole circle. I didn't draw the whole circle, but it's kind of like this bowl shape, suggesting it's the side of the sphere of creation or consciousness. So if you call everything you experience, and if you do this consistently for a period of time, let's say for 30 minutes straight, you constantly think only of things as being God or consciousness. think only of things as being pure consciousness. You're going to have a shift in experience. You're going to begin to contact the true nature of things. You're going to begin to instinctively, intuitively have a recognition, a direct connection to that pure consciousness, that pure I amness, that universal beingness, the God state. So absolutely, I'm so glad you asked this question. You completely completed the session. Thank you very much. Um, yep. So more on that in the next session. How to Deeply Retain This Information by ND on YouTube. It's like I get it, and for a couple of days it sticks, but then after I find myself seeking and needing more in order to stay in alignment. This is just a journey, my love. Accept it. Accept it. It's going to continue. Okay. Accept it. It's okay. How to deeply retain this information. Watch more of these sessions. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Devote yourself to it. Be more desirous for it. Incorporate more of it. Have more faith in what you've already realized also. Stay indifferent to the doubts you have about yourself. Always investigate yourself, but you don't have to doubt yourself to investigate yourself. You don't have to judge yourself in order to investigate yourself and to discern what you might be playing into that's unenlightening you further, as opposed to allowing yourself to unwind that knot of the knotted net, into a relaxed state of recognition of the natural flow state of intelligent awareness that's always already present, hearing my voice right now as I speak. So it's a matter of practice. It's a matter of exposing yourself to teachings and teachers like this that directly instruct you into the nature of this. And to shift your desire towards more of that, and to develop a firmer conviction or faith or belief or trust in what you have already recognized and realized during your practice, so that the doubts don't come in and like give you the illusion of having to seek all over again. It's never true that you have to seek all over again. It might feel like that from time to time, like you're just repeating a whole cycle that you've already done before, but it's never truly the case. You're always breaking new ground. But you can avoid this sort of continuous cycling or repetition or the feeling of repeating yourself. You can minimize that to some degree, or to a great degree, by staying so strong in your faith, so desirous to hold on to the faith, the conviction of what you know is true intuitively, what you've already realized, so that you become indifferent to your doubts. And if you catch your doubts in the early stages of the doubt, and they don't have thought vibration momentum yet, and you stay rooted in the true beingness in the I am, or at least in the faith in your practice, and the faith in your teaching, and the faith in what you've already realized and recognized, then the doubt will just kind of go poof, as you stay at the root of your confidence. All right, my friends. Oh, one question. Facebook. Kevin Martin. As a teacher, what would you say is the best way to develop/express a great transmission? So transmission is the concept, and this is actually a good question to finish off with, so that we can, after I'm done talking, I just recommend you stay present to this video for another minute or two. I'll stay here in my chair and I'll look at you for a couple of minutes or so after I'm done talking. The concept of transmission, for those who are not familiar with it, or for whom it's maybe a little woo-woo, it's really not that woo-woo. It's quite scientific if you want to look at it that way, because it deals with vibration, it deals with energy, it deals with quantum mechanics, it deals with consciousness, it deals with the power of intention. And these things have already been witnessed and documented for like decades now, in terms of the effects consciousness has on matter, and spooky action at a distance, or actually action at non-distance, meaning there is no distance, entanglement, etc. So there is definitely a scientific basis for the concept of transmission, for sure. So what transmission is in spiritual terms, or sort of in practical terms, is similar to, if you're in a very sort of moody state, you're very sort of grumpy, and you're living with a few people, and you come down the stairs, it's morning, you haven't had your coffee yet, or whatever you do to kind of get centered. You forgot to do my meditations. You're going to take this grumpy energy with you, and your aura, your electromagnetic field, your facial expressions, the subliminal messaging that's going on, what you're saying, what you're not saying, the tone of voice, all of you will exude the vibration of the state that you're in. And you've all seen experiences, examples of this, where then the whole group gets affected. That's transmission. It's just not it's not the most ideal application of it, but it's an example of transmission. So on the contrary, if you can access a really peaceful, confident, faithful state, and you approach somebody who has just kind of lost a portion of his business maybe, or things aren't going so well in the circumstantial world, or he's just defining it in a negative way, and it doesn't even have to be a bad thing. If you approach, and if you have a connection with that entity, and you approach them with such a confident, loving state of faith, of knowing that everything is perfect for something and that everything will work its way out, will find its way into resolution, and that everything is well, actually, that all is well. If you are really confident in that vibration, again, your body language, your subliminal messaging, your electromagnetic field, your aura, your subtle energy fields, your subtle bodies, even your non-local bodies, your truly spiritual bodies, which you have, radiate this frequency and this being, even over distance, like we're doing here, but especially more noticeably, more obviously, when you're physically present with someone, you can affect them in a positive way. Their energy field, this is a form of healing. Their energy field will align itself to what's the more overwhelming energy field. So if your energy field is much stronger in its vibration, much more positive and holistic and aligned and integrated, then that entity will benefit from that. To whatever degree they are willing to receive that is also a factor. But for sure, they will be affected by it in a positive way. They will at least get the invitation to sort of fully heal and step out of their victimhood and step into the perspective that you're vibrationally holding for them, the consciousness that you're holding, the state of being that you're radiating. It's just emission, it's just radiation. And so if someone has attained a high level of consciousness and clarity, and they are able at will, or even naturally and automatically, they come from that state, then if they look at you, or not look at you, but just they're present, or you meditate on them, or you connect to them in terms of like a video, or in person, or eye gazing, or even just by intention, by thought, closing your eyes wherever you are, when you don't have video available, no pictures, no physical communication, you can still meditate on an archetype. You can meditate on a person, on a teacher, on someone you trust, on someone who represents a certain state of being that you could really benefit from, that you really aspire to yourself. Then you can totally tap into that energy field, which is always already existent in this non-local, timeless field of consciousness and quantum and whatever you want to call that stuff. But here directly, which we'll experiment with a little bit, and it's not for everyone, because a lot of people in mainstream will label this woo-woo and weird and like hypnosis, or like called like behavior, but it's really none of that. It's really just an act of love, especially when it's done in terms of a teacher offering its vibration to someone who seeks the state of consciousness that the teacher has penetrated or mastered or embodied. So in this case, the intention would be for you to get a sense of the state of consciousness, and I can shift my state of consciousness to different types of realizations to kind of provide the vibration that the student desires to access more of. But in this case, I'll just generally access more of the God state, what I call the God state anyway, which we'll get into more in a later session, which is that pure consciousness without the layer or filter of location, or without being identified with the individuated body-mind. And it's this universal sense of consciousness, and that's why I call it the God state. So I will be contacting more exclusively that state, even though it's already present here, naturally, effortlessly. But I will tune the majority of my consciousness into that state for just a minute or two, and then I'll get up and walk out, and then the session will be over. But for now, you can relax and just make eye contact, basically, through the video, and just get a sense of that state. And I actually posted a video like this on my Instagram just today, so maybe you've already gotten a taste of that. Before we do this, I want to thank you for being here. I hope I gave you some direct access to true spiritual awakening for yourself, and I hope to see you again on Saturday. Again, we appreciate you all spreading the word and this message, this introductory yet comprehensive course in enlightenment, reaching as many people as possible during this COVID-19 time. I love you very much, and thank you for tuning in. What you are is bliss. It's worth the practice. I love you. Have a great night.